Will a third temple be rebuilt in Jerusalem? Will sacrifices return? And will the Antichrist really sit inside a literal physical temple? According to a major school of biblical prophecy called Dispensational theology, the answer to all of these questions is a clear yes. Today, we're diving deep into the prophetic scriptures that formed this specific view. We're going to walk step by step from the book of Daniel all the way to Revelation and explain how it all connects in end-time prophecy. Let's get started. First, to understand this view, we need to know its foundation. Dispensationalism teaches a few key principles: a literal interpretation of prophecy, a clear distinction between Israel and the church, a future 7-year tribulation period, and a literal 1,000-year reign of Christ on earth, known as the Millennium. A core idea here is that God's promises to the nation of Israel have not been transferred to the church. They will be fulfilled literally for Israel in the future. This leads to a specific prophetic timeline. According to this view, the current church age ends with the rapture of the church. This event kicks off a 7-year period called the Tribulation. During this time, the Antichrist rises to power and a third temple is functioning in Jerusalem. At the halfway point, he commits something called the Abomination of Desolation, which begins the Great Tribulation. This all culminates in the second coming of Christ, which then ushers in the Millennial Kingdom, followed by the eternal state.
Now let's look at the key scriptures. The foundation really begins in Daniel chapter 9. Verse 27 says, "A future ruler shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. But in the middle of the week he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering." In dispensational interpretation, that week is a period of 7 years, the tribulation. For sacrifices to be brought to an end, they must be happening in the first place. And for sacrifices to be happening, a temple must exist. This ruler is identified as the future Antichrist. This brings us to the Abomination of Desolation. Daniel mentions it, and then Jesus himself confirms it in Matthew 24, saying, "When you see the abomination of desolation standing in the holy place." Dispensationalists argue that since Jesus spoke this decades before the temple was destroyed in AD 70 and linked it to other end-time signs, he was speaking of a future event. And that term, the holy place, strongly implies a functioning temple. The Apostle Paul adds even more detail in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. He describes the Man of Lawlessness who sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. The explanation is straightforward. A literal temple will stand in Jerusalem, the Antichrist will enter it, declare himself to be divine, and stop the sacrifices. This is believed to happen exactly at the midpoint of the tribulation, 3.5 years in. Then, in the book of Revelation, chapter 11, the Apostle John is told to measure the temple of God.
In this view, this confirms that a temple exists on earth during the tribulation. The passage also mentions the outer court is given to the Gentiles and Jerusalem is trampled for 42 months, which is exactly 3.5 years, perfectly matching Daniel's timeline. During this period, the focus of God's prophetic plan shifts back to national Israel, as the church is believed to have been raptured. Revelation 7 describes 144,000 being sealed from the 12 tribes of Israel, reinforcing that Israel has a literal, distinct role in the end times. But there's another temple to consider. Ezekiel chapters 40 through 48 give an incredibly detailed description of a future temple. Dispensationalists distinguish between the third temple of the tribulation and this one, which they see as the Millennial Temple, operating after Christ returns and sets up his 1,000-year kingdom.
It includes priests, land boundaries, and even sacrifices. Now this raises a huge theological question. Why would sacrifices return after Christ made the final, perfect sacrifice on the cross? The dispensational answer is that these are memorial sacrifices. They don't provide atonement for sin, instead they serve as a powerful remembrance of Christ's finished work. Just as the Lord's Supper today looks back to the cross, these millennial sacrifices will look back and commemorate His perfect atonement. So, to recap the timeline of the Antichrist, he first makes a peace covenant with Israel, allowing temple worship to be restored.
Then, after 3.5 years, he breaks that covenant, sets up an image of himself in the temple, and demands worship, which connects directly to the beast described in Revelation 13. At the end of those 7 years, Christ returns in glory. He establishes his millennial kingdom, and Ezekiel's temple becomes the center of worship on earth. But it's not the final chapter. In the eternal state, described in Revelation 21, John says, "I saw no temple, for the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb are its temple." So even in this view, the ultimate future has no physical temple, because God Himself will dwell directly with His people. In dispensational theology, the third temple isn't just a minor detail, it's a central piece of the prophetic puzzle, essential for understanding the tribulation timeline. But it's crucial to remember, the ultimate focus of prophecy is not a building. It is the glorious return of the King, Jesus Christ. Thank you for watching.